Chapter 38, Vehicle Extrication and Special Rescue. Oftentimes, an ambulance is not responsible for rescue or extrication, but you might work for a fire department or a rescue squad, so it's important that we cover the basic concepts of what extrication and rescue is. Always, as with everything else, safety is paramount. It's important that we think about our mental and physical preparation. Are we prepared to conduct a rescue? What does our team look like? What do we look like? Do we have the proper protective equipment to mount this rescue or participate in it? And what is our mindset? As with most EMS calls, rescue and special rescue and vehicle extrication requires special protective gear. Seen in this picture, you see firefighter turnout gear along with some leather gloves. Pretty typical for most car crashes that we respond on. Those who actually be involved with disentanglement of the patient from the vehicle will be wearing protective equipment very similar to this. It's important that you become familiar with the different terminology as it relates to vehicle systems, safety systems, and of course crash zones, etc. Many modern cars are equipped with what is called a loaded bumper. It's a spring-actuated bumper that helps absorb the kinetic energy during a crash. Airbags also fill on impact, and some airbags can come out of the steering wheel at about 200 to 250 miles an hour. Now, they deploy rather quickly, they absorb the impact, and they deflate equally as quickly. But they're filled with cornstarch or talc powder or something like that. So sometimes it could be irritating. It might be kind of smoky when you arrive on scene. Unless you see actual flames or smoke from the engine compartment with flames, this is probably not a car fire, and it will not more than likely catch on fire. However, it's important to look for minor abrasions or burns from the propellant as it comes out from the airbag. So some of the fundamentals of extrication. Extrication is the removal of from entrapment or dangerous situation of a person. And oftentimes we remove the car or the vehicle around the patient. We don't remove the patient from the vehicle. We actually take the car apart around the person, trying to limit any damage or aggravation of injuries that the patient might have already. As with most calls, we have our 10 phases of extrication, 10 phases of patient assessment, et cetera, et cetera. It's important that we think about these things as we're preparing for going on a call that might involve extrication. And this could be, a serious motor vehicle collision, entrapment into a building or a trench or whatever device that might or structure that could collapse. So as an EMT or EMS person responding to a call, your responsibilities may be in providing medical care. So we arrive on scene, you might be asked to set up the medical command or patient packaging or receive the patient. Oftentimes at Central Kitsap, we'll have an incident commander on that scene, and then we'll set up medical, which is typically either an aid unit or a medic unit. If there's multiple patients, we'll be in charge of triaging and packaging the patient, getting them ready for transport. We'll have a transportation officer, and they'll coordinate with the hospital, receiving hospitals, should it be a large event. The rescue team is responsible for stabilizing and securing the vehicle. They'll crib it or put struts on or whatever fancy stuff that the rescue guys do. And this is often done by perhaps an engine company level operation with basic stabilization, and then more advanced stabilization is typically done by a rescue company or a ladder company. And our responsibilities then would be to assist them however we may be able to do that. Typically, law enforcement will take care of traffic control, but until they arrive on scene, if their ETA is extended, then we need to think about traffic control and maintain a safe work environment and a safe work area for those who are providing patient care or setting up for extrication or stabilization of the vehicle. The firefighters are typically going to pull a safety line, a hose line. They're going to make sure that the scene is safe all around. They'll park their apparatus. If you remember the illustration in the last lecture, they'll park so that the scene is safe and protect the scene with their vehicle in the way. So how do we prepare? Well, we prepare by talking about it, training on it, looking at their equipment, going over this stuff, practicing constantly, just like we practice with our patient assessment by doing constant practice and routine and drills. Preparation for extrication or firefighting or numerous other events that we could do require that we practice a lot. On the way to the call, there are things that are running through our head. If we're in an ambulance responding to the call, we might want to know what kind of rescue we're going on. Is it somebody who's trapped? Do we have to consider crush syndrome? Is there a need for someone to be in the quote-unquote hot zone to provide patient care, assessed with respiratory, with ventilation or, controlled bleeding or whatever it might be. So these are things that we think about en route to the call. When we arrive on scene, it's important that we, again, position our vehicle in such a way, first of all, not to discredit what the slide says, but we want to allow access for other vehicles to come in that are involved with rescue and extrication of the vehicle, occupants, whatever the scene might be. Typically, the ambulance will set up for a rapid transport corridor so that the patient can be removed from the vehicle and taken to the ambulance in an expeditious manner and then put into the ambulance, and then we're not blocked in or anything like that, so that we can transport quickly if needed. Make sure that we have the proper protective equipment. If we're on the roadway, Washington state law and actually the National Department of Transportation requires that all rescuers wear a traffic safety vest, a reflective traffic safety vest, anytime that we're working around moving traffic. So follow your local protocols, guidelines, and whatever your agency requires for that. We do our scene size up just like we would with any other call that we go on. Figure out how many patients we have. Do we need additional resources? What is the best way to manage this emergency scene? Once we've done that, it's important that we maintain situational awareness. We look for possible hazards that might be on the scene. We do what we call a 360-degree walk around, a 360. At Central Kitsap, where I work, we do what's called an inner and outer 360, or an inner circle and outer circle. So usually the person who's going to be the patient care provider will do the inner circle. So they'll check the inside of the car. They'll check immediately around the vehicle, looking for any entrapment, pinch points, the vehicle's working or not working, and then the other member or the officer, first arriving officer on the engine, will take the thermal imaging camera and walk around the vehicle a little bit further out, looking for ejected patients, maybe trapped patients under that, other hazards that we don't consider, such as down power lines or hazards that may be off the road. Remember that depending on the speed of the vehicle and the rotational forces, our patients who might be ejected could be up in trees or laying in a ditch somewhere, a lot further away from the scene than we may think. It's important that we walk around, we look in the bushes, we look around, make sure that we don't miss any patient. And that's where the thermal imager comes in very helpful, because we can see the heat signatures of people. While we're looking at the vehicle, we're looking for things like the bent steering wheel, imprints on the dashboard. Was the patient restrained or unrestrained? Did the airbag actually deploy or did it not deploy? And that's important. If it did not deploy, we need to keep in mind that if the impact to the vehicle was significant enough that it should have deployed, the airbag still can deploy while we're touching and moving the vehicle. So you need to be aware of that and be careful. And then what are other things that we're looking for on the scene that could be a problem? Is there short or damage to the battery? So we want to make sure that that we're prepared for that. Is there wiring on the car, that kind of stuff? Of course, then we wouldn't want to be touching the vehicle. And then what's the weather like? Is it going to impact or hamper or hinder our extrication efforts, or is it going to make it more difficult? So the rescue team supervisor, group leader, and the extrication group leader and the medical group leader, they all kind of talk together with law enforcement, the incident commander. They figure out the best way to come up with a plan to remove the patient should that need to, should heavy tools, for example, be used to remove the patient. If you are going to be inside the vehicle to provide patient care, you need to wear the proper protective equipment, and it needs to be okayed by the incident commander. Make sure that we're looking around for other hazards on scene. We mentioned some of these already before, but electrical lines, power lines, that kind of stuff. If power lines are in contact with the vehicle, do not touch the vehicle. And make sure that we let the patient inside the vehicle if they're conscious. Remind them to stay, instruct them, don't remind them, instruct them forcefully if necessary to stay inside of the vehicle and not touch anything, do not touch the doors, that kind of stuff, until the power company can come and shut off and secure that power. And the only way we know it's secure is when the power company shows up and they say, yep, it's hot, it's off. Otherwise, those wires are live until proven otherwise by the power company. Make sure that we create a safe work zone. It is amazing how many people like to watch what's going on. They'll have their cameras out, their cell phones, they're going to be videoing us, they're going to be looking at things. So create a safe work zone, keep the public back, keep the family, if they're family there and they can walk, remove them from the vehicle, have them go stand with somebody at either the command post or by medical, usually is where we send them so they can be taken care of. If the patient is, or excuse me, if the vehicle is unstable, then basic stabilization will be taken care of, usually by the first engine company that's on scene. They can do usually initial basic stabilization. If more than that is necessary, then a rescue or a ladder truck can take care of that. Make sure the car is in park. Make sure the parking brake is on, if possible. And one of the things that we do at CKF&R is we turn the flashers on, the four-way flashers on the vehicle. That lets everybody know on scene that there's still power to that vehicle, and once we have secured power, those flashers go off. And the only time those flashers turn off is once we've secured power, so that everybody knows that that vehicle's hot. That's kind of a thing. That brings us up to the alternative fuel vehicles. We have hybrid vehicles that are running all over our communities, electric only vehicles, And so never ever cut the orange wire on any of those vehicles. Those are super high voltage, and that could be fatal for the rescuer to do that. We also have vehicles that are powered by propane, natural gas, methanol, hydrogen gas, um, and we have some of those vehicles that are running around in our communities today also. There'll be scene lighting that might be needed on scene. Some vehicles come with telescoping scene lights that we can extend, we can raise up into the air and illuminate the scene. But if not, we may be asked as an EMT who's not involved with extrication to help set up scene lighting with portable lanterns, etc. So be available and be willing to do whatever assignment within your capabilities that you are asked to do. Also, we might be asked to set up a landing zone or coordinate with the incident commander where the landing zone might be. It's a team effort again. Remember, I keep saying from day one that EMS is a team sport, and we work really, really well with our other team members and our other partner agencies, and that makes this team all the better, much more functional. Sometimes gaining access to the vehicle is as simple as opening the door, and other times it's a bit more complicated to do that. For example, in this picture here, you see the vehicle impacted with the rock walls. There's significant damage to the front end of the vehicle. We can figure that there might be some intrusion in the passenger compartment. The windshield has been broken and starred. Now, did the rescuers do that in an attempt to get to the vehicle or to the patient or not? I'm not really sure. Notice on between the two wheels on the side that you can see the photo. I don't know if you can see my cursor moving or not, but right here, some step chocks cribbing. They're stabilizing the vehicle. Over here on the other side, it looks like they might be using a ram. They made a little TP cut to gain more access and more room. And then they have a blanket cover the patient, soft protection, we call it. And then somebody here just talking with the patient, making sure they're okay, that kind of stuff. Look for those hazards. Make sure that we are safe, and above all, that we're making sure that our patient is safe also. Typically, when we go on scene and there is the need to remove a patient, there's usually a couple of plans. We have our plan A, which is this is what we think is the best thing that's going to take our patient, get our patient out if we have time. We have our plan A. We have our rapid. This is like, if we need to get them out right away, we're going to do this. And then we usually have a plan B in case plan A and rapid doesn't work. So we need non-flammable blankets, soft protection we call it, and then sometimes we have to use hard protection. And one of the things that we use often at Central Kitsap for hard protection, if we're cutting through something and we don't want to cut the patient, which it would be really, really bad, is each one of our vehicles has a stop and slow sign on it, or two of them, and they're made of metal that's pretty thick. And so we'll put that down over the patient, and that can give some hard protection for them. If it's simple access, like illustrated in this photograph, where you just open the window or open the door, then it's pretty easy to get in and start talking to the patient. But what are some things that you notice on this photograph? Notice right here that we have starred windshield. So potential head injury, concussion injury, maybe a coup contre coup, or maybe it could be a more serious skull fracture. Those are some telltale signs of whether the patient may or may not have been wearing safety equipment, such as a seatbelt. Perhaps this is an older vehicle, so it wouldn't have any airbags or anything like that. It might not even have, this vehicle that's in this photograph, may not even have a shoulder belt on the seatbelt. If we have significant difficulty getting into the vehicle, we can use special tools. This here is a Hearst tool, often referred to as the jaws of life, that you see in this illustration. And it's a hydraulic tool. They have hand-operated hydraulic tools. They have power-operated with a hydraulic power plant, or battery-operated power tools to help remove the vehicle around the patient. Once the patient has been extricated, our job as an EMT goes back to what our job always is as an EMT. We provide manual stabilization of the spine. We make sure the ABCs are intact. Do they have an open airway? Are they breathing? If they're not breathing, we breathe for them. Treat any critical and life-threatening injuries. Transport them to the appropriate trauma center. Determine the urgency of extrication. Sometimes extrication takes as long as it takes. We may need to be urgent, but remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Let the teams who are in charge of rescue and extrication do their jobs. By doing that, all of us work together for the betterment of the patient outcome. Communicate with all parties involved. If you were assigned to medical, communicate with the rescue group supervisor or the extrication group supervisor on what you think is the best way to remove the patient from the car. By doing this, everybody then is on the same page. Our input is imperative to protect the patient from further harm. And again, always wear the proper PPE for the job that you're doing. Once we remove the patient from the vehicle, we transfer the patient, we put them on a backboard or some other type of device. In the photographs that we've been looking at here, that would definitely be a time and place where, even with the protocols today where we don't backboard very many people, that C-spine and backboarding, spinal immobilization of some kind, whether it's a backboard or a scoop stretcher, is definitely appropriate for this patient. Then once we're done, the scene is over. We do our job. Well, as far as taking care of the patient, we put the patient in the ambulance. We go to the hospital. We clean our ambulance. We replace any used supplies, and we go back in service. Some specialized rescue situations do exist in the communities that you will be working in, whether it's here locally in Kitsap County, Mason County, Jefferson County, King County, or wherever it might be, or whether you go abroad or across the U.S. or overseas. We have cave rescues. We have confined space rescues. There's numerous dive rescues. I mean, the Pacific Northwest and certainly in the Puget Sound area, we have a lot of water. So because of that, we have people who are trained to perform rescue in all of these types of situations. Here's some other specialized rescue situations. We have some who have come through class who've been involved with the ESAR emergency search and rescue. We have some who have gone on to specialize in technical rescue with rope rescue in Kitsap County as part of the Washington State Region 2 or tech team. I think that's through the Department of Emergency Management, DEM. They're trained in trench rescue. We have at my fire department, we have water rescue. We have rescue swimmers that can go on the water. We have a smaller rescue boat. And I mean, the possibilities are endless. Kitsap County also has a multiple agency tactical SWAT medic program where they help with the local law enforcement agencies. They're trained, special commission, and they go in and help should the need arise in situations of conflict. So the opportunity to specialize in rescue is vast. It all determines, is dictated by what your agency or where you are has to offer. And of course, they probably want you to be an EMT for a little bit before you start specializing in some of these other skill disciplines. Technical rescue situations abound in a variety of calls that we've gone on. We had a simple last summer, last August. Two girls were hiking in the DNR land just outside, west of the city of Bremerton, into the unincorporated area out there. One of the girls slipped and fell and dislocated her patella. It was quite a hike in. It was about a 300, maybe 150, 200, I think it was 200 foot drop to the bottom of the canyon that she was at. It might have been 300 feet. It was a long ways down. It was clear that she was not going to walk out on her own. So we activated the Region 2 Tech Rescue Team. They came out. They did a vertical rescue with her, took her up, put her in a Stokes basket, carried her up, and she wound up being fine. But we've activated Tech Rescue often. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to activate them, but it's nice to have those people who are there, and they pretty much do what they say. So when you arrive, you set up your staging area. You might be medical. You might, if you had some awareness level tech rescue stuff, you might be on the end of the rope going over the side of the cliff or into the cave or whatever it might be. But if you are not trained to do that, let them know, make sure they know, and do not engage in that activity. Remember, your first priority is to go home at the end of your shift. We talked about search and rescue. There's quite the search and rescue operation in Washington State, for example. They're broken into different regions and teams. Kitsap County has one. Every county has one. Sometimes it's run through a mountain rescue organization. Sometimes it's run through the sheriff's office. But they're well trained EMTs or not. Their job is typically to go out and find people who are missing in all weathers, in all terrains. Trench rescue, we talked about this briefly. Mini cave-ins, trench collapses. Anytime there's any subterranean work, they're putting in new water mains, whatever it might be. They have to have proper shoring. So walls that they build so that the dirt doesn't fall in on them. And if that happens, then they call people who are specially trained in trench rescue, and they go out and do that. But remember, if we go in there and we haven't properly shored it up before we go in there, now we're part of the problem. Now we have the rescuers that are collapsed. So there's a lot of rules governing trench rescue. And as this says, the very top bullet point, do not enter the trench without proper shoring in place. That is so important. So as an EMT on scene, we may be at the top setting up our medical section, getting ready, establishing our to receive the patient and our transport corridor. And the transport corridor is not just from the ambulance to the hospital, but it's how do we get the patient from where they are being extricated from or removed from, in the trench or in the vehicle or in the building or whatever it might be, to the ambulance also. So that's all part of our transport corridor. So we're going to be kind of busy for a little bit, and then we might wait until they bring us the patient. Some areas, as we mentioned, have tactical medics, SWAT medics. Kitsap County does have some. Other counties also, Pierce County, Mason County, King County, of course. Specially trained. They're normal EMTs like you and I, paramedics, who have received additional special training to help mitigate hostile active shooter situations, active shooter scenes, that kind of stuff. So We call them CMCIs, CMCI, critical incident mass casualty. So critical being there's a bad guy out there with a gun and we're not sure where he's at. And then, of course, working on an ambulance, you may get dispatched to stand by to structure fire. Show up, report to the incident commander, or follow the protocols according to your agency and what the command structure is, and then follow their rules. Unless you are trained as a firefighter, you do not engage in firefighting activities. So that covers chapter 38, vehicle extrication and special rescue. If there's any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.